You're listening to the Favorite Marriage Podcast, a place where you and your spouse can experience God's favor on your forever.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Favorite Marriage. We are so glad you joined us today. We are your hosts, Monty and Jeannine.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in for another episode. We have an exciting topic we're going to be talking about today, and that is how a couple can ask the right questions in their marriage relationship. And so I think this is going to be pretty insightful and a great learning opportunity for those who are hearing us today.
Right. Because, Monty, I don't know how many couples, when they first start dating, they ask all the hard questions, right? You sit across dinner or ice cream or whenever you started dating and you begin to ask some hard questions, and you picked and you asked about family, asked about future job desires, all those things.
Do we want to have kids?
Yeah.
How many kids do we want to have? Where do we want to live?
Yeah. And sometimes after you say I do and you get into just the flow of family and marriage, you tend to forget to ask questions.
Yeah.
And you can learn a lot from your spouse, not just at the beginning, but all the way throughout, because we're always changing.
Yeah. And it's easy to neglect asking the questions because of the busyness of life. Once you start having children and jobs, you tend to put that on the back burner. But I think there's something special when a couple can learn to ask the right questions.
Yes.
Because good questions, like great questions, really create curiosity within the marriage. They create an opportunity for a husband and wife to really learn each other. I was contemplating a book that John Maxwell, he's a very great leader, and he has a book out called Great Leaders Ask Great Questions. And in the book, he talks about how your ability as a leader to ask a great question will actually transform your team.
Right.
It can transform the person themselves. It can actually transform the leader themselves.
Sure.
But I would like to add that a great question can literally transform a marriage. Don't you think?
Yes, absolutely. Because we cannot assume things about our spouse. When you get married and you think and you may have known at the beginning, you may have known, her favorite perfume, her favorite flowers, her favorite food. Well, those are things that can possibly change over the years. I mean, I used to love roses, but now I love, what's my favorite flower?
Carnations.
No. That is not.
Tulips.
No, not tulips.
Man, I am failing.
That's a good question to ask me later. Anyway, but
What is your favorite flower now? You got me thinking.
I love lilies.
That's what did I say tulips?
You said tulips.
I meant to say lilies.
Lilies.
Yeah.
But anyway, just goes to show that things change over the years, and it's important to just be on top of those things, be sharp, and know your wife and your husband.
Yeah, I think asking the right questions can create a very fun environment. Like, for example, we just did, about the flowers. And it also can create a opportunity to really learn and to be interested in your spouse and to one another. And so I think asking the right questions, the good questions, the important questions is very, very crucial when it comes to drawing a marriage closer together.
For sure. And we like to ask those questions for you and I, where we talked about in other episodes, and we've brought it up many times, are in those conversation date nights.
Oh, true. Yeah.
So just asking some, 1 to 3 questions and really pick apart some of those. But we're going to get to those questions here in a bit.
Well, the need to ask the right questions is important because as a married couple, you go through different seasons in your marriage or different stages in your marriage. And I know for us, we've been in the honeymoon stages. We've been through the parenting stages. We've been through the changing of job stages. I mean, now we're in the empty nesting season stage of life.
Yeah.
And at every one of those stages and seasons, we've had to ask very important questions so we can learn each other and we can move on and develop a game plan.
For sure. So there are those questions that you're going to ask each other when you are newly married, right? So some very specific questions that you're going to sit down and really learn about your spouse. Then when you're parenting, more questions are going to come
Sure.
up. You know, like um, who's going to teach the kids how to drive? You know,
That'd be me. Yeah.
just to name one, or
Or even like with parenting, like how are we as parents going to discipline our children,
that's a
right?
huge
That
one.
was a really big one for us.
Yes, that was a really important one
Yeah.
for sure.
What about like the questions when we've had to negotiate financial situations?
Yes, and those change often, especially if you've had job changes multiple times throughout your marriage, because we have been in where you were full time pastoring, where I was a stay at home mom, and then
Yeah.
I got a job, and then you were bivocational. So a lot of those questions came up during those times in our marriage. Also, when we had change of jobs,
Yeah.
I know for us it was really important to ask specific questions about the people you work with. You know, how late, how often are you going to work late? You know, things like that.
Yeah.
What is going to be required of you from this job?
Sure.
How much work are you going to be bringing home? You know, those are big questions.
Yeah. Now that's so good. I think it's important to ask those questions about
Mm-hmm.
the job. I'm thinking of another season that we experienced when we sent all of our kids off to college. You know, we're empty nesters, and we sent 3 kids off to college, and we were asking some pretty serious questions at that point. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Some were kind of fun and exciting. You know, like we don't do we have to cook dinner every night, or can we just eat whatever we want? You know?
Yeah. Or like going back to the specific questions about our kids is like, how often are we going to visit them? And are they allowed to come back home?
Yeah.
They didn't want to come back home. The door was always open, but yeah, we'll see about
Yeah.
our youngest.
Yeah, so many different seasons in marriage that
Mm-hmm.
require a couple to really stop and ask those important questions, so that they can know how to navigate
Yeah.
through that next season or that next journey. And I think those are
Mm-hmm.
really important.
Yeah. We need to just be an open book to each other. You know, as husband and wife, you should be an open book. You should be able to ask your spouse anything.
Yeah,
Maybe not at any time. There's always
the
a
timing
good
of it. Yeah,
time.
yeah,
But yeah, we should be open books
yeah.
and we should not have to assume
hmm
things about each other.
So, for the sake of our listeners, because I'm thinking it, and I know somebody might be thinking it now,
Hmm.
are there any questions in a marriage that are off limits?
I don't think so. I mean, because when you think about intimacy, and you know, we refer back to this all the time about Adam and Eve in the garden, there was nothing between them. They were naked before
Mm,
each other,
yeah,
and we should practice that in marriage. Like there should be nothing that's off limits as far as knowing things about one another.
sure, yeah. And I would say that if a couple or a spouse is saying, I can't really ask my spouse that question,
Hmm.
or that's because maybe they fear the response of the answer, or maybe it's more of a deeper level
Hmm.
question. What would we say to that spouse? I mean, we would definitely want to
Mm,
encourage them to ramp up to get to that point of
yeah.
intimacy, right?
I'm so glad you said that because not always is it. I'm afraid to ask this question because I don't know the response I'm going to get. But it also depends upon like what you were used to seeing when you were growing up in your home. Like when you saw your parents conversating, like was it always healthy or was
hmm
it good, or did you always see dad snapping at mom or mom snapping at dad when they would ask, why are
Yeah,
you home late tonight? And then it blew up and it was this big thing in your family. That can cause a person to draw back and be afraid and be like, you know, I'm not going to ask those questions for sake of keeping peace in my
sure.
home. So if you're feeling like that might be you and you hold back from asking questions because you're afraid of what they might say,
Yeah,
or you're
mm,
afraid of ruffling feathers, or you just want to keep peace,
sure.
I think it might have to you might have to go back to just checking your heart and asking the Lord to bring healing in your own heart, in your own mind, and wipe the slate clean for your marriage. How are you and your spouse going to start this life
Yeah.
together and continue to grow? And how do you want your children to view you and your spouse when you are in conversation,
Yeah.
and
I,
make those changes?
yeah. And as you're talking, I was thinking about the approach or how a spouse would package a question. We don't want you to always be coming to your spouse asking questions like in a critical manner, like in
Right.
an accusatory, like,
Yeah, that's
what did you do last night, or what happened here? Whereas more where you put your spouse on a defensive mode. So I think it would be important for a couple to start with the softer questions and be careful of
yeah.
how you package the question that you're asking your spouse.
Yes. I love the analogy you use. You've taught this in our marriage group before about how when you package something, it makes such a huge difference. So like when you're giving a present, if you went and bought your spouse a present and you threw it in a Walmart bag and you toss him like, here, I bought this for you today. I thought about you. I mean, that is just,
You're like, thanks.
yeah, you're not going to get a very good response at all. Versus if you really went out of your way and maybe you put a bow on it and you took your time to package what you're giving your spouse, they're going to receive it so much better. So in the same way with these questions.
Yeah, yeah, it's all in how you package it. Yeah, yeah. So Jeannine, as we're going to be giving some ideas here, different questions for our audience, I want our audience to consider a couple things as they begin to move towards the idea of asking great questions. Want to give you a couple thoughts to think of as you're navigating in this new adventure for you. So number one, when you're asking your spouse these questions, be an active listener. I think that's so important that we learn how to listen to understand and not listen to respond.
That's good.
So being an active listener.
Yes.
Number two, we would say be curious. As you're asking each other these questions, get interested in your spouse. Like
Yeah.
become a student, become a learner of what they're saying, and that will actually draw you closer together. And then the third thing we want to do when we're asking question is we would say be opportunistic. In other words, look for opportunities during these question times
Yeah.
to draw closer to each other and to let your hearts be knitted closer to one another in
Yes.
that context.
I like it.
Yeah,
Those are good.
yeah. So let's go ahead and give a couple questions or a few questions that we want to give our listeners of ways they can begin to
Yeah.
jumpstart
I
some
think
of those things.
that list, that exhausted list, maybe just read like the 10 questions that we had.
I can
Or
do
was
that.
there like 10 to 14, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So what we'll do is I'll read a couple, like I said, 10 questions, and then let's focus on 5 important questions, and we'll just kind of talk
Yeah,
about
sure.
those things. Okay. So a couple questions that you and your spouse can ask each other. And again, these are more of just for you to start the conversation and get things going.
Yeah.
How am I doing as a husband and wife in general? How can I improve as a husband and wife? What's the thing that you need most from me right now? As a husband and wife, how can I show more love or more sensitivity to you? Are you dealing with anything that I can help or pray with you about? That's a good one. What's your dream date night or your dream weekend with me? That can be pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
What are a few ways I need to be more understanding of you? What are a few ways you desire to see our finances improve? And what have you learned to appreciate about me that you did not know when we were first married? That's a good question for the older couples, right?
Yeah, that's a good one.
And then another one to consider is, are you satisfied with the amount of time that we spend together?
Good.
Okay. So let's take 5 questions and let's talk a little bit about them. And hopefully we can give a little bit of insight of how we kind of navigate some of those
Yeah.
situations.
So
Okay?
are we going to kind of model this for them, like how this would look for us,
Yeah.
so they can take this example. Of course, you don't have to do these exact questions, or you can. I mean, some of them are really good.
Yeah. So one of the questions that we'll ask each other, I think we asked each other this just yesterday. So Jeannine, what has God been teaching you lately?
So you asked me this. We went on a hike, so this was a really good way to, not feel like, oh, I'm under this light and like investigation. We
Yeah.
were just on a little hike and we were asking each other questions. And when you asked me that, it made me feel like you're concerned about my spiritual walk.
Yes.
And I think that's really important for a husband and wife to be accountable to one another in our spiritual journey.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I responded to that. So I mean, it was good conversation.
Yeah.
And then in turn, because you asked me, I asked you.
You're right. Yeah.
And you
And what
responded.
was the common word or denominator that we both felt like God was teaching us in our life right now? One word:
Trust.
trust.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Trust.
And again, a season of trust right now in our marriage, and that's what God has been teaching us. And so that can be a very, very good question. I think it is a spiritual question that a husband and wife can answer for those of you who are faith-based and want to dive a little bit deeper in how maybe God might be working in your heart or what God has been teaching you in your marriage or you as an individual.
Right.
Yeah, another question. Let me see here. We have, what are you most excited about during this season in our marriage?
Okay. So I would have to say the season that we're in, again, it goes back to the trust, just trusting God to see what He has in store
Yeah.
for the favorite marriage,
Yeah.
our ministry that we're just pouring our lives into right now. We know that He has a purpose and a plan for us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to see what He's going to do
Yeah.
with our lives because we just surrender. We surrendered. We are here and available, and we're just waiting for Him to use us
Sure.
how
Yeah.
he chooses.
Yeah. I tell you what, I'm really excited that we're in the empty nesting season because I think we have, just in the last 2 years, we've really been able to, I just think, dive deeper in learning more about each other. I mean, for 26 years, we were focused on parenting, raising children. In the last few years, now we were able to kind of have a refocus and a redirection where
Yes.
we're learning each other more than ever before.
Yeah.
And I think we've had some pretty cool, exciting times already as empty nesters. And so that excites me in the future,
Yeah.
as we continue to grow. And I know we want to travel, we want to do some vacationing, we want to do more ministry things that now life has kind of afforded to us. And so I think for me, that's really exciting now as our empty nesting season.
And I'm learning to not feel so guilty about not bringing the kids along.
Yeah.
I'm getting better at that.
Yeah.
I mean, everywhere we go, it's like, oh, I wish the kids were here.
Yeah.
Or, it's just, it's hard to break away. And not that we totally break away from our children. I think another beautiful thing about the empty nesting stage is watching our children mature and grow and start their own lives. And
Yeah.
we look at them and we're just so blessed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Excited to see what God's doing in their own life, in their own families.
Okay, this is going to be a good question. You ready?
They've all been good.
All right. What strengths do I bring to our relationship? Besides my physical strength?
Yeah. You do a lot of the push and pull around here. Your spiritual strength?
Anything. It says, what strengths do I bring to our relationship? So it could be a spiritual strength. It could be anything.
So spiritual strength, I would have to say that you are definitely a spiritual leader, not just to us, but I see it in our community, in your job, at our church. That is a strength that I look to and I watch.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of use those qualities and characteristics of you and try to see like, well, how can I put those things into operation in my job and at school as a teacher, and even with
Mm.
the ladies that God is bringing into my life, how to navigate situations when I see you, doing life here at home on the phone. When you come home sometimes and you work at home, I listen. I listen and I watch you, and I'm not sure if you realize that, but I do.
Mm.
And I'm always learning from you. So you're an amazing spiritual leader.
Yeah. Sound like a spiritual stalker.
Well, I can do that because
Yeah.
I'm your wife.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And for me, I think you bring a lot of strengths to the marriage, but I would have to say the biggest ones that I've seen is your ability, how you plan, you organize things, not just when the kids were in the home, but
Mhm.
just your ability to plan and organize, and you keep us on track. And so, like, obviously, if we're going to plan a getaway or a vacation, you're very organized, you're very well planned. You like A, B, C, D, where me, I'm just like, we'll just go with it. And so you kind of keep me grounded
Mhm.
when it comes to organization and planning and things like that. And so that's a really cool strength. And of course, you're a teacher. You're a math teacher at a high school, so you have the gift of a teacher, and you bring a lot of insight and wisdom and teaching moments for our marriage,
Mhm.
which I really, really appreciate.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah. Next question.
Yeah. So I feel kind of like let's like go back
Yeah.
to our audience. We have not forgotten you're there. I kind of
Yeah,
feel
you're
like
there.
we're investigating one another, but these are just examples. Like we had not we, I mean we talked about the first one
Sure.
on Saturday, but these are fresh off the press. Like we're just asking these to one another right now live, So you can see how this can actually work in your own marriage, and how it just really pulls those special things out from
Yeah.
one another's hearts. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it's important. Yeah. Next question.
Yeah.
Okay. So for our audience, we haven't forgot about you. We're giving you a sneak peek into how we would do this. So the next question is, how can we improve our intimacy or take it to the next level?
Yes. Important question.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And why do you want to ask that question? Why should we ask that question in marriage? Because we should be growing in intimacy, and not just talking about intimacy, sexual intimacy. We're talking about all areas of intimacy. Asking these questions, sitting down together, taking that hike, sitting at a restaurant, asking these questions is getting more intimate. But I think we are talking a little more specific here, right? Like this sexual piece.
Yeah, you have to add that in there. I mean, so when it comes to sexuality and the sexual expression that a husband and wife has in their marriage, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they can talk about things like frequency,
Mm-hmm.
arousal. They can talk about environment. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they can talk about so many different things, communication,
Yeah.
before, during, and after
Right.
the moment. So all of those things can really elevate those intimacy moments in the
Yeah.
marriage
And
sexually.
from what we have seen through sitting across the table from other marriages, this is a topic that is one of the hardest questions, or the hardest topic to ask questions in, right?
Can be, yeah.
Yeah, they feel awkward, or they just like, oh, they want their spouse to assume
Sure.
all these things. And I'll tell you what, asking questions in this area will definitely grow your level of intimacy in the sexual realm. Like that's what we're talking about here. Is
Mm-hmm.
it's weird and awkward, even like kind of, even now talking about it, it feels a little weird and awkward, not only because we know people that are watching us, it's like our kids, parents. It's just an awkward situation sometimes, but it doesn't have to be. And those are
True.
areas of growth. I mean, we've grown in that area where we did not talk about that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It
We
was,
just did
it
it.
was, it was just
Literally,
like,
we just did what we thought we should do.
right. And we have learned to grow in those areas where we ask each other those questions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been good.
Yeah. Amen.
Amen.
Yes.
Sorry, kids. Sorry, mom and dad, but we have to. It's a marriage podcast.
Yeah. So last question that
Okay.
we want to share. What are some things we used to do before we were married that you now miss? Good question for our
And-
couples, right?
And this is going to be more of a question for marriages that have been married for
Yeah.
a lot of years.
What do you think most couples are going to say that they miss dating?
Mm-hmm.
You think dating kind of goes by the wayside and they used to do that before and now it's like, when's the date night going to happen?
Mm-hmm. Sex again.
Sex again. Yeah. No, that's
It is
that's
true.
matter of fact, we were just talking about that in our marriage class the other night. As kids
Mm-hmm.
come along, it's like, couples were saying before the kids were there,
Right.
there was a lot of frequency, and then now as kids were part of the equation in the family, it's we just kind of get it when we can get it, So yeah,
Right. And I think be patient with each other when you guys are asking your spouse questions.
mm-hmm.
They might not be the answers that you're hoping for.
Yeah, you
I-
might be surprised.
Yeah. I am thinking about like the question about sex, and you might be asking a young mother who is nursing and just does not feel as beautiful as she used to, and you're not going to get the answer you want to hear.
Or Janine, even a husband who's in his older years,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe his testosterone levels aren't where they used to be, and the arousal isn't there, and so it could be an interesting question or an interesting answer you get from him, because he might not feel the desire like he used to, like he had in his 20s or 30s or even 40s. But as you get into your 50s and even your 60s, your desire, all that changes, so you have
Yeah.
to be prepared for the answers. And then, but together as a couple, figure out a game plan. How are we going to work through this together? And like it goes back to being curious and learning each other and using those moments to draw you closer together during those challenging
For sure.
moments.
Right. And those questions will be not just surrounded about the sex talk, but around many of these, like the ones that you mentioned at the top of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Be patient with one another. And like you mentioned too, about being curious and having those opportunities, being opportunistic,
Sure. Yeah.
that you find the answers together, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So let's go ahead and wrap it up today.
Mm-hmm.
So
Ask questions.
yeah, ask questions. So as you go on your next date night, or maybe if you're driving around and you find yourself drinking a cup of coffee together, or you're just taking a walk, take some time to stop, ask the right questions, get curious about your spouse, and let the answers draw you closer together.
For sure.
So as we wrap up our time together, we like to share a few things with our listeners. First and foremost, we have upgraded our YouTube channel. So if you haven't had an opportunity to subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can take a look at that. We have all of our videos. We have our motivational videos. We have all of our short videos. I mean, there's a lot of marriage content on our YouTube channel. So if you haven't had a chance, please check out our YouTube channel at The Favorite Marriage. Like and subscribe to that. And that way you won't miss another episode once we release it and launch it on our YouTube channel. Second thing is our Keep Showing Up apparel, our merchandise. We have ordered plenty of merchandise that is ready to be shipped out. You can actually go to our website at thefavouritemarriage.com under the resource tab, and you can order any of the merchandise that we have available there. And then, of course, last but not least, we would like for you to keep praying for us, keep praying as we continue to do God's will here at The Favorite Marriage. This is our 26th episode, so it's been an amazing journey. And like always, we want to say thanks to all of our listeners.
Yes.
And so, Jeannine, why don't you go ahead and take us home today?
And as you all pray for us, please know that we also pray for you. And as always, we pray that you would experience God's favor
On your forever. Thanks for listening to The Favorite Marriage, where you and your spouse can experience God's favor on your forever. If you enjoy this resource, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We'll see you next time on the Favorite Marriage Podcast.